Welcome everybody to episode 6 of Stu and Coco, and I'd like to welcome Peter Bell, the owner of Expedite Group, who are specialists in the London commercial property market. Welcome, Peter.
Hi everybody.
Hi. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring how collective tenant action can affect outcomes with unscrupulous landlords and operators. We're going to be using the recent case of and recent litigation as our case study. We'll be looking at the roles of the administrator, the operator, and indeed the tenants. And at the end of this, Peter, what I'm hoping to do is to come out with some thoughts, insights, and possibly an open invitation to a second round where we can see some of the protagonists.
Yeah, not a bad idea. All good.
Okay. All right. So look, if you could give us, if you start off with a bit of background to yourself, a bit of a plug on Expedite Group.
Thanks, Tony. So we are a turnkey commercial property business based in the City of London. 90% of our clients are within the M25. Front end, we look like CBRE. The back end, we look like Pickfords. So it's a sort of complete turnkey solution. Find the property, do the surveys on behalf of the tenant looking to take a lease, and then we do the design, project manage, fit out, relocate, and then we've got a little FM business that looks after the client. So it's a complete turnkey sort of occupancy life cycle business.
Fantastic. So taking the pain out of everything from finding a new workplace home through to managing it, looking after it, doing the legals, the whole lot.
That's it, yeah. And we're fairly unique. I mean, because most of that process is broken up, it's fragmented in the market. You've got the agents at the front end, you've got the D&B contractors in the middle, and you've got relocation companies, and you've got FM companies. But we package that all together, predominantly for smaller tenants. So those that don't have sort of property professionals or real estate professionals in their businesses. So tenants generally sub 15,000 square feet. Those type of companies that really do need their hand held all the way through the process because it's a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, providing a lot of reassurance. Yeah, okay. All right. So look, we're using the recent case of, just tell us about and when they went into administration, Peter.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because one of my small businesses was actually based in everybody got an email or a letter on, I think, around about 26th of March saying that they've gone into administration. Not much more information about that. If you've got any concerns, contact the administrators, etc., etc. But looked like business was carrying on as usual because there's another operator sort of pretty much the next day saying, and we've got the rights to receive the rents against the licenses. So
Fantastic.
It seemed a bit strange at the time. Nobody, of course, at this moment in time, it was literally at the beginning of the COVID crisis, nobody really thinking too much about that, thinking, well, what do I do? And nobody in any situation really to challenge it or certainly move out. So most people sort of started asking questions but carried on paying their rent, and the next thing we know, we're actually paying another company into a different bank account. Nobody wants to get thrown out of the offices.
But Peter, so, I'm guessing each one of those tenants was had deposits paid.
That's it. This is the big key. So obviously, when people started to contact the administrator, the biggest issue was that as an unsecured creditor, all of those rent deposits, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds now, had literally disappeared.
Wow.
So a lot of very unhappy small businesses. So in our case, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a couple of months' rent. And it meant that our term was up at the end of May. It meant that if we wanted to move somewhere else and we wanted to put a rent deposit down somewhere else, we didn't have that money. So in one way, it was it's a slap in the face to lose the money. And then another way, it was like a sort of arm behind your back because you can't now leave because you don't have the cash to put down on another rent deposit. And that's for us. There were lots of small businesses in that place, small one-man bands. There was a podiatrist in there. There's a lady that helps people with their hearing. Lots of small businesses, and these sums of money mean an awful lot more to them. So it's not just the indignity that something's gone wrong here. You've gone bust and you've lost my rent deposit. So you haven't put that rent somewhere safe. You haven't put that money somewhere safe in some sort of escrow account. So a lot of very, very unhappy people, including us. And us was much more a matter of principle that somebody had been doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. They've squandered that money. And then the next day, it turns out all the directors that worked at have now set up a new company. And the next day, taken the rent from all the tenants. But by the way, we've lost your rent deposit. So it didn't go down very well.
No, yeah, I've got some sympathy with that. I think it's also worth saying in terms of the provision of services. So over the period that rent was, that Newco was after rent, right? So continuation of rent, did they continue to provide the services in the building?
No. That was the next thing that tenants started to get really upset about, because not only did they lose a rent deposit, they were then not given any real preferential terms to continue with Newco. So there wasn't any, well, look, guys, we know you've lost your rent deposit, so here, have 2 months rent free, so you've covered your loss, and then carry on with us, and we'll look after you, and we'll give you a great service, and none of that whatsoever. It was you've got to start paying. If you don't pay, we're going to send you in a winding up petition. We're going to rip you to pieces legally. We've got the rights to collect the rent. Completely unscrupulous behaviour. Wow. And in the meantime, as you've just alluded to there, the place was filthy dirty. They didn't turn up during the COVID thing, which you could say you expect, but most office buildings were kept in a safe and clean condition. Obviously, cleaners were going in there in different circumstances, socially distancing, etc. But this place was left to rot, literally. We went in there a few times at the end of the tenancy, and the place was stinking. There's posts piled up. It was literally hadn't been cleaned for the best part of 3 months.
Yeah, it's an interesting footnote that I know that the superior landlord, which is a super city livery, had continued to provide sanitation and cleaning services, not only in that building, but in the rest of the portfolio around the area.
Yeah, that's right.
So interestingly, when tenants voiced these issues, not just about loss of deposit, but also about lack of continuation of any sort of cleaning services or sanitation services that were specific to floors, what was the retort?
Well, most of the time, and obviously we're going to lead on to now about sort of collective tenant action, but at that time, prior to getting involved, each of the tenants was writing individually to the new operator saying, look, we're paying a rent, but the place is in a mess. And what about our rent deposit? All of that sort of communication. I would say, looking at the correspondence, probably 9 out of 10, they got no response at all.
Wow.
Just pay the rent, pay the rent, pay the rent. If you don't pay the rent, and when people didn't pay the rent, because obviously some tenants said, well, we're just not paying because we don't know who you are. You haven't given us any evidence that you actually have the rights. The administrator was saying,
yes, taken over the license, yeah.
Well, and that's the point. The licenses weren't taken over, but the rights to receive rent against the licenses was. So very confusing for a tenant that doesn't understand sort of insolvency law. Well, hang on a second, I've got a license with that company, that's in administration, and now you're a new company and I've got to pay you rent against that license that is no longer, or is it, with my rent deposit gone, etc., etc. So very, very confusing. And when the tenant spoke to the administrators, it was like a little circle they put everybody into. The administrator saying, we'll speak to the new operator. But once we got more involved in this, we discovered that the administrator had a little bit more responsibility than they were making out, because they didn't sell the licenses to Newco. They held the responsibility, this administrator, effectively to continue to provide the services. So it wasn't the Newco that wasn't providing the services, because they're actually not supposed to.
It was the administrator.
It's the administrator who's supposed to be continuing to provide the services, because that's where the licenses sit. Now, of course, you then beg to question, well, hang on a second, how can that happen? How can this situation prevail? Unless there's a very, I don't know, let's call it, I don't want to say cozy, because that would probably be a little bit slanderous, but let's say there is an understanding between Newco and the administrator. that's okay. You know, you can provide the services and you can collect the rent, because we can't, because there's no money in the pot here for us to be employing cleaners or anybody else to look after the space.
Yeah.
This carried on, of course, because where you've got the right to get the license money from the tenants, but you don't actually have the responsibility to provide services. But you also then legally don't actually have the right to do things like lock the tenants out of their offices when they don't pay, because all of those rights actually still lie with the administrator. But Newco took it upon themselves to actually be punitive with the tenants that didn't pay, because they're still asking, well, where's my rent deposit? And can you give me the evidence that you actually have the rights to collect the money? And you're not providing the service, or nobody's providing the service, but you're still screaming and threatening me with winding up petitions to collect the rent from me.
Wow.
So a terrible situation.
Peter, excuse my ignorance, I'm not obviously an insolvency specialist, but surely the administrator has a duty of care to the creditors, and surely those creditors will include the tenants who have lost their deposits. So, you know, I don't.
Well, the administrator has a duty of care to the creditors of, okay, and with the licenses and the rent deposits, and they have a duty of care to investigate if anything's gone wrong there. So in other words, well, they've already said to me that they are investigating the directors because the money was not kept safe and it looks like it had been used for operational purposes. Right. Now they're investigating. That's what I was told. I just can't say that's what happened, but there is no money. So the rent deposits that were kept, or should have been kept for the purpose of returning it to the tenants, had been used for operational purposes by all accounts.
So the allegation or the suggestion is that actually the directors were trading insolvent.
Well, yet to be proven, but we do have evidence that they went into administration in March, but we had evidence of their inability and late payment on a number of different things, including people that have been maintaining the building, cleaners, etc., and also rent deposits going back to August that were not paid or delayed, and people trying to chase that money. So it looks on the surface of it that the problems, i.e. the difficulties that have maybe in making that particular operation profitable, had been going on for months and months and months. So yeah, we don't know, but it looks like they were probably trading at some point in time insolvently. And insolvently means if you're using monies that don't belong to you, like the rent deposits, those rent deposits can't be sat on a balance sheet as an asset. It's a liability because you owe that money to somebody else. And if you're using that money to run your operation, you are trading insolvently.
Right, I'm with you. Okay. It looks like we could very well do with some more input from an insolvency specialist or potentially even some of those directors that are under the spotlight now from. Tell me, before we go into that, Peter, tell me more about your kind of knight in shining armour, your mustering of the tenant to ensure that collective tenant action, which has so far ended up or is starting to get some real positive momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to sound a little bit like Robin Hood now, but I think it's more of an indignancy for me because of the way these people are treated. And it's just a general problem, I think, in the marketplace where landlords and landlords agents generally treat tenants, fair paying passengers as they are, not the same way as they should be treated, if they were getting another service from almost anybody else. So it's always been a big bugbear of mine. And when I started to see some of these smaller tenants really suffering, I thought, well, the only way we're going to get anything really here is by clubbing together. So I got an old database of the tenants, and we've got about 25 people around the table, essentially, obviously on Zoom, and we shared our stories, which were very, very similar. Same stories, i.e., winding up orders, or threats sent to the tenants. No correspondence, no explanation, no services, etc., locked out, access control cards terminated, etc. And the energy between those people was so strong that it wasn't like a crusade, well, we're going to give these people a hard time. there was that noise, but it was more of a, a sort of force for good. We shouldn't be treated like this, particularly this moment in time with COVID, where people were, losing their livelihoods, worried about their health, their businesses are in trouble. And then on top of that, you've got an unscrupulous landlord saying, well, by the way, give us the money for something we're not really providing very well. And if you don't, we're going to wind you up.
Well, I think this is an interesting point of reference, Peter, and we've got to be quite clear about this. My information says that the superior landlord, i.e. have actually been very benevolent and had granted the administrator / to mortgage holiday. So in fact, the superior landlord had been very good to the operator, but in fact, during the same period, the operator, like you've said, has really squeezed those licensees, those tenants.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me, and it's just when you look at the overall behaviour, which seems almost desperate. The business has gone bust. They want to keep it going. They've resurrected it. They've phoenixed it out of flames. They've started again in a new under a different name, but the same directors, the same personnel, etc., etc. I just think they're desperate. I think they're desperate to get income, try and keep the whole thing together. I think they owe a lot of money. From perspective, it's almost like the devil they know. They've got somebody in there now paying rent. So Newco is paying rent. And as you say, any agreements they had before, were not being handed over to the tenants.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, and then going back to your point about duty of care to the creditors with the administrator, you're absolutely right. They do have a duty of care, but once in terms of what goes on and what happens afterwards to the tenants, they've got no responsibility other than they should be providing the service. But straight away, you've got rents coming in to one organisation and the responsibility of providing service with another. There's no tie-up. So, as I say, there's got to be some sort of a behind-the-scenes agreement. Well, we're not going to be providing that service, i.e. the administrator not being able to provide that service because we don't have the resources or the money because there's no money left in the pot. So you'll have to do that because obviously if you don't do that, then people aren't going to pay their rent and they have all the reason to do so.
Yeah. And obviously, we wouldn't go so far right now to say that the administrator is potentially complicit with the new business, but what we'd like to hear, I'm guessing, is an answer from the administrator about these questions.
Well, that's right. I mean, I like you, I'm no insolvency expert. I've been involved in something when I acquired a company once, and I've seen the way that administrators work. Ultimately, they've got to get a job done, and they want to get in, they want to get out. They have a duty of care to do the best things for the creditors. But obviously, naturally, they will work the system as best they can to get the best deal for the creditors, but also to get the transaction over and done with. They don't want these things dragging on for years. Yeah. There's never enough money in it. So they go in, they make their money, they do their deals with everybody. I'm not saying they're complicit either, but this all happened very quickly. And it doesn't make a lot of sense how one day nobody knew that we were going into administration. Then we get an email and a letter, and then literally a day or two later, there's somebody else operating and taking the rent and sending in demands for the rent. And by the way, just by the same amount of money, just pay that into a different bank account, please. That doesn't make any sense because if a company's going into administration, because we know that they were in trouble for a while, so that knowledge has been around for a while. And so surely what should have happened is if this is a going concern in any way of this rents to be collected, that should have been published. There should be a number of people that could have bid for that, as another operator. Well, why can't I take that over? Rather than the same directors that have obviously, not operated very well and not looked after the rent deposits, having the opportunity to just carry on effectively scot-free.
So what I'm interested now in is that from here, the next chapter, that collective tenant action with centralised or joint legal representation. And I think you said from an insolvency specialist, so a specialist insolvency litigator which again is the key here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And that joint action from circa what, 14, 18 tenants?
Well, in total, there's about 25 tenants, but
Wow.
who have actually taken action, simultaneously, so that there is the maximum impact. Around 14, yes.
Wow. Okay, so fantastic. So those tenants are now seeking a formal response from administrator. Yeah.
So they've terminated their licenses, and they've actually terminated them with the administrator, because the licenses are not owned by the new co. Okay, but obviously new co have been told that those rents aren't going to be paid anymore because the license has been terminated, because you haven't been providing the services. The place is an absolute mess. It stinks. It's unsafe. And on top of that, whereas everybody else has got their COVID-19 situation in place, including, so you go into the reception in Mercer's and there's clear instruction of what you can and can't do in terms of social distancing and cleaning your hands, basic stuff. Nothing had been done on the floors that these tenants occupied, and yet no one was telling them that they can't occupy or can't use the space because it's unsafe. So no guidelines, no risk assessment undertaken, no risk assessment published. And if you have a building that's got more than 50 tenants or 50 occupants in there or 50 employees, you, by the law, effectively, health and safety, COVID-19 sort of updated legislation, you need to publish your risk assessment. You undertake a risk assessment, you publish it, you hand it out to your staff, telling them exactly what the outcome is. None of the tenants, they've asked for it, none of the tenants were given anything and just told, yes, you can go in there, and oh, by the way, next week we're going to do a deep clean. You can walk around the place, there's no guidelines, it was just, to be honest with you, it's
unsafe.
Unsafe and
hazardous.
Scandalous is the word.
And scandalous by the sounds of things. All right. Well, Peter, it's an interesting and maybe not exciting, but it's certainly an interesting conundrum. And sounds like we're at the sort of first and second steps of something that could go on away here. I'd like to say to anybody in the audience, anybody who's watching this, certainly if you're an insolvency specialist, certainly if you're an insolvency litigator with a view, and of course, any of those interesting individuals who were directors, no names mentioned, we'd welcome your input, and we're welcome to have you in for the next chapter of this. But in the meantime, Peter Bell, thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tony. Take care. Take care, everybody.